Hello my clever crafty friends, it's Janet and I'm back today to share 5 cards made from the February Hero Arts My Monthly Hero Card Kit. This month the theme is birthday. There's so much you can do with this kit, and as always I've tried to do something a little different from the crowd. I've covered many techniques, from embossing on acetate, using inks and splatters for backgrounds, and color combos for the die cuts using Copic and watercolor markers. I'll also show you how to add color and texture to the large fancy cake die in the kit. So sit back, relax, and be prepared to be inspired. I invite you to give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. So let's begin by taking a look at what's inside the box this month. So here are the kit pieces that I've unpacked from the box, and let's take a look at what's all here. First of all, we've got 3 lacquer pens. They come in kind of this aqua blue color, a pink, and a bright yellow. We'll certainly get a lot of use out of those. Then we've got a wonderful little shaker bit package here with balloons and other confettis inside. And then here is our large 4x6 stamp set that we're accustomed to receiving in each of our kits with Hero Arts. And this one's a little bit different this time because we have a large background stamp, as well as area in the center left open so that we can add different sentiments and other features. And we also have this smaller background stamp, which could be used as an inset in the larger one, or for, as you'll see in a minute, a shaker card. Now what's a little different this month is that some of the dies will cut out the background stamps, like many of these flowers and the cupcakes and balloons and such. But you also receive this medium-sized package and this beautiful cake and stand. And then many birthday sentiments. Taking a look at the dies this month, I've cut them all out and I've put them on this magnetic sheet like I usually do. But let's show you where they go on this set. We've got the larger package right there. And then the cake on the pretty stand is right there. Then we've got all these other dies that will cut out images in the background stamps. So there are actually 4 flowers. There's this larger flower here with some leaves. It's quite pretty. Then we've got a cone flower kind of look here, which it's a really pretty flower. Then there's a flower that has kind of a twisty stem to it. And that one goes right there. And then the last flower is sort of a tulip looking flower, and it is also on that smaller background stamp. So again, 4 different flower images. Then last you've got 2 balloon cutouts. So there's one for the cluster or the bouquet of balloons. I think it's for the one on the right. Yes, there it is. And then there's a single balloon too. So this is wonderful. It gives you lots of options for using those background stamps for something more than just backgrounds. The first thing I've done is stamp a bunch of these images on white cardstock using my VersaFine ink and my clear embossing powder. And this will give me good images that I can cut out and color if I choose to do so. Now again, none of these images are made to go as you see them as sets or anything on the cards. They're strictly here for me to cut them out and use them for other things inside of my cards, like that balloon, the flower, and others. And here are all the images I chose to cut out of the stamp images I showed you earlier, and I also cut out the large cake die. And with that, I'm ready to begin with my first card. I'm going to start card number 1 by stamping with a rubber stamped image from Hero Arts. It's called Brushstroke. And I'm going to use Versamark on about 3/4 of this stamp because of course I've got a piece of cardstock here that's just a little bigger than A2. And the stamp is much bigger than that. So there's no need to put it on the whole entire stamp. But then once you've stamped it, you can kind of wiggle your stamp platform around and you'll sort of see where you need more coverage. And I think I needed to do this at least 3 times to really get it to the point where I felt it had great coverage. Now if you're using this particular MISC stamp platform, you'll want to take out the thicker foam piece because the rubber stamp is quite thick, and if you left that foam piece in there, it's going to be just kind of hard on your platform hinges there. So what I did is I just took a couple pieces of painter's tape and just stuck it down so that I wouldn't have to worry about it moving around. Now I can go ahead and cover the whole image with clear embossing powder, and this is Hero Arts embossing powder. And once that's heated up, you're going to see how pretty and shiny this got. You can sort of see that there. And now I'm going to use 2 Oxide inks in Worn Lipstick and Squeeze Lemonade. These are 2 of my favorite colors together. They remind me so much of like lemonade, both pink and yellow lemonade. It's just really refreshing. And I thought the 2 colors would look great together on a nice pastel card celebrating a birthday. Now you can apply these inks with a lot of different tools, but I like the mini ink blending tool from Tim Holtz. They work really well, and you can swap out the little foam bottoms for different colors and get a lot of use out of 2-3 of these applicators. But it gives you the ability to control the pressure and how much ink you're going to put on. I will keep blending this until I get both colors to match up, and in this case I've got more yellow than pink. So I'm going to take the pink and bring it over the top of the yellow now, and it's going to turn a little bit tangerine-ish in color. Once I get it the way that I want it to be, I will, before I work further with it, take a piece of paper towel and wipe it, and that will take off any excess Oxide ink that remains on top of your embossing. I also trimmed the panel down using a Lawn Fawn rectangle die. So it's ready to move on now, and I've got a Cottage Cuts die set here that I'm going to use to cut out a space and a frame for a shaker card. And I need it to fit the size of that smaller background stamp. That's why I was holding it up to verify that. I'm going to set up these 2 dies so that I can cut a frame, and the frame is going to go around the window on the card. And to make sure that this just stays in place for me, I put some painter's tape on it and ran it through the machine. Here is the finished product, and you see I have a pretty frame. And this will fit around that stamp perfectly when I use it for the shaker. So now I've taken another die, just a rectangle die, to cut open the shape where I'm going to put my acetate. And here's the acetate that I'm going to use. This is a heat resistant acetate, and I'll put the link to that in my video description. You'll want to use that because heat doesn't really mix well with acetate too well unless you have an acetate that's kind of made for that. Now, the directions for this acetate will tell you to run it underwater to take the static out. I find that doesn't work real well. So I just coat the whole thing with embossing powder from my embossing buddy before I use the Versamark on it. And in this case, I put a sentiment in the middle of it which says, "Make a wish." And I'm going to coat the whole thing and do this a couple times just again to make sure I've got a really good impression. And in person, you can really see that impression in the reflection. You can see a bit of it there, but in person, it's really strong. Now I'm going to use gold embossing powder for this because I thought it would show the most over the glitter paper that I'm going to have in the background. And so with this, you just want to make sure you tap off all your excess, but also make sure you have good coverage everywhere. And once you feel that's good, then you can heat emboss it, and it will do pretty good with the heat. Now once again, you're going to have to wipe it all off, get all that powder off once you're done. And I'm going to bring in my handy dandy lint roller that I have on my craft table. It picks up any excess embossing powder or dust or glitter. It's wonderful. Cleans everything up for me nicely. So once I have that all done and it's well wiped off, you can see that I've got a nice image here. And it's going to go on the back of my cut just like that to make my shaker window. So to secure this, I'm just going to use some washi tape, doesn't matter what color. I might have tried to grab a little thinner washi tape, but I make do here, as you can see. My image is just a tiny bit larger than my window, but that's okay. It still looks good on the front and I'm happy with it. Now here's where I was just a little afraid it was a hair bit too long, so I decided to tear it up and make sure that it wasn't too wide and showing in my window or on the edge. And one more time, I'm going to place my frame around this so you can see how much nicer it looks with the frame versus leaving it plain. It makes a huge difference. So now I can start preparing my well, and I did that by putting 2 layers of 3M foam tape, and I'm showing you how I did that on just one of those sections. And this will make it high enough to allow the shaker bits to move around without getting caught back there. My next step is to glue down the background that's going to show through the shaker window. And this is a pastel purple glitter paper, really pretty, and it's going to show off that gold embossing powder and the shaker bits inside of it. Now I'm going to attach the frame that goes around the outside of the shaker window. And that just again makes it really nice and finished in appearance and is a nice touch to the front of the card. Next is to prepare the shaker bits, and I will take them out of the bag and let them fall onto my background piece here. Now they're sticking a little bit to the glue that holds that baggie together, so I'm fighting with that just a little bit, but I eventually get it. And then I want to make sure at this point that all of the bits are far away from where the foam tape well is going to be, because obviously you don't want them stuck to the foam tape. You want them inside that rectangle created by the foam tape. So I'm going to put that down and then apply some really good pressure around the edges of that foam tape to make sure that it's very well sealed, because the last thing you want is any of those shaker bits getting out. Now comes the fun part. Shake, shake, shake. I'll finish this off by adding a few sequins, and now it looks like a real party's about to happen. This one is just a lot of fun. And there you have it, card number 1. I begin card number 2 using again my Oxide inks, and I'm going to prepare stripes of them and then blend them together. So I started here with worn lipstick, then carved pumpkin, squeezed lemonade, then a section of shaded lilac, and then I'll finish it off again with another strip of worn lipstick. And each time that these colors come together, I will work on blending them so that they are nice and soft and we don't have harsh lines. I'm coloring my cake image with Zig Clean Color markers. There's a darker pink and a lighter pink. You'll see me use some Wink of Stella on the top. And then finally I will cut out a sentiment using a Stampin' Up label maker. I know that was really fast, but I'll show you more about that punch in a segment just a little bit ahead. Alright, so now I'm preparing some white acrylic paint using my splatter brush from Tim Holtz and putting a lot of white splatters all over my card base. You might also notice that I used a stitch die to cut out my panel, and I also ran it through a Tim Holtz embossing folder for a really neat effect. Now I'm just going to glue this onto a white card base, and it is the same size of an A2 size card front, so it will cover the entire front of my card. And then I've got my sentiment that I showed you just a few seconds ago. This was cut with a label punch from Stampin' Up. I don't remember the name of it, but you can find that in their website. And then I also prepared the cake with one piece of foam tape and glued the cake stand part on top of the label. And I thought the dimensional lacquer would be great to use on the pieces of this cake that have the shell pattern for frosting. I didn't cover the whole thing. I wanted to leave some of that texture showing, otherwise it would just look like a blob of lacquer. But this technique worked really well, and I love the finish that I got from it. And then this bright yellow lacquer is surely meant for the candle flames. It just works so beautifully for it. Now I've got a couple lavender gems that I'm going to put on each side of that label for a finishing touch. And that completes this card. Here's a close-up of it. Now I'm on to card 3, and honestly this is one of my favorites of the 5, and I would love to know if you like it too. It's really clean and simple, and it starts by just using some of the tumbled glass distressed oxide, and I'm bringing it in from the side of the card. So where the fold is, I'm bringing it in deeper and then gradually lightening it up. And on top of this I've got a little herringbone piece of paper. The black and the white along with the blue really stands out, and it's just so fresh and crisp. I really like it. Now this is about 1 inch wide by 3 3/4 length, and it will go right there as I show it. I'm going to attach that with some double-sided adhesive here, and it will be placed on the card. And that is going to serve as my sort of base that I will attach my other stamped elements to. So let's start working on those. I've got 3 images here, and I'm going to color them up using some Copic markers. The flower is going to be colored using V06, V04, and V01. I'm just going to put in some shading with the darkest V06, then blend out using V04, and fill in what remains with V01. Then I'm going to use a little bit of YR12 at the bottom of that flower, just to break up the purple there. And then I'm going to use greens, G21, G94, and G99. For the stems and leaves, this is the same process. Use the dark marker first to put in some shadows, blend out then with G94, and then finally fill in with anything that's left with G21. And there's not much room, to be honest, here with those leaves and stems. So if you just want to use 1 or 2 colors, that's perfectly fine as well. Next, I'm going to work on my package, and I'm going to use those violets again, the same ones, V06, V04, and V01. I'm going to start with the V6, putting in my shadows around the ribbon and the bow and the top of the package. And then I will take the V04 and blend that out, just applying the marker over the top of the darkest color and then extending it out. Once that looks good, I will add the V01, and that's going to be blended out even further and fill in with all the remaining space. It's such a pretty purple blend. If you are looking for a purple blend of 3 colors, this one is wonderful. It's one of my favorites that I've recently discovered. Now, when you're using Copics on a larger piece like this, I tend to do it twice because the marker desaturates from the alcohol in the inks. So the darker colors get lighter, and pretty soon you can hardly see your shadows anymore. So the second coat really fills that in. The colors blend even nicer together, and you get a much deeper and darker look, which I like. So even though it's pastel, it's got a lot of contrast and a lot of shadow going on there. Now for the ribbons and the bow, I'm bringing out my favorite pink combo, which is R81, R83, and R85. And once again, just like before, I start with the darkest color, put in some shadows, then blend out. So I put in first R85, then I went in with R83, and then I'll fill in with R81 for the rest of it. Of course, you could use any of your favorite combos in something like this. I would just recommend that you either match the flower or use a complementary color for your package and flower, so that it kind of all has a nice cohesive look. All right, so here I'm just finishing up my coloring on the ribbons that are on the top and the side of my package, or maybe the top is the top of the box, I'm not sure, but I treated it like ribbon. And the last thing I'm going to do is color up this balloon. Now again, it's quite small, so I'm just going to outline it a little bit heavier on the left and right side with the darkest R85. Then I'm going to go over the top of that and bring it out a little bit further with R83. And then I will bring in R81, and I'm going to leave a sliver of white in the middle just so that it kind of looks roundish, because even though it's small, we want it to have dimension. So now I'm ready to create my scene on the card front. First goes my package on double-sided foam tape. Then I'm going to glue in my balloon, and it's a small size anyway, so I want it to be kind of in the background. Otherwise it won't look right because it's way smaller than my package, and that would not normally be the case. And now I'm going to put this pretty cone flower on the front, right as if it's resting in front of my package. And I'll just create a sliver of foam tape so that it can stand up where the flower is, and then the leaves will be attached to the bottom of the package. Finally, we need to stamp a sentiment in here. I chose Celebrate. It fit just perfectly for the length of my herringbone paper, and I'm going to use the black VersaFine, which really is a super dark black color. It does kind of stain your stamps, but it's worth it to me because it just makes such a beautiful imprint in that deep dark black, which is what I wanted for these cards. Now, they are new stamps, so usually they don't stamp perfectly right off the bat. So I inked this up twice and it was perfect. There's always a need for a few finishing touches, and I took advantage of the pink lacquer that came in the kit to put a few dots down around the package and the sentiment, and I think it finished it off really beautifully. As I mentioned, this is, I think, my favorite card of the batch. Just love it. And here's a close-up of card number 3. For card number 4, I'm really coloring up and texturizing the large fancy cake die cut. Now the die that makes this die cut is large. This is about 3 1/8 inches wide and 3 6/8 in height, so it's quite large. And what I started doing here was using my grays to put in just the patterns of the frosting, like when you use your knife to put the frosting on the sides of the cake. And then I also used it on the base of the cake stand. And with my shadows, I tried to create kind of a round feeling to that post in the cake stand. The cool grays I used were C0, C1, and C3. Now for the main garland on the cake, I took out my blend of pinks that I used before, but I've also added a dark red, an R27. So I started by putting the R27 in and then blending out with R85, R83, and R81. And then what I'll do for the garland on the top layer of the cake and the bottom layer of the cake is use BG45 and BG05. Also, the rosettes on the red garland are the same color of BG45 and BG05. Then I used the R27 and the BG45 to put a bunch of dots all over the cake front as if it had colored confetti. And then I used those same two colors to put stripes on the candles. And I think they turned out pretty fun. Now I can move on to the two flowers. They almost look like hibiscus flowers to me, don't they? But in any case, I'm using that same blend just to keep it simple. So I start with the R27, the darkest color, and then work on R85, then R83, and R81. And these are big enough flowers you can actually use that many colors and get some nice dimension and shading out of it. The leaves are the same blend I used before, G99, G94, and G21. Now I have a heart die cut. This is a stitched heart die cut that I have from Cottage Cuts, and I applied that heart so that it would be just a little bit cut off on the left. And then I put foam tape all over my cake die cut as well as the two flowers and put that together to make a nice little collage. The sentiment I chose was Make a Wish. Of course, with all those beautiful candles, you would want that. The blue-green lacquer made some beautiful dots, and the yellow lacquer made great candle flames. Here's a close-up of this beautiful cake and flowers. Card 5 is going to have some patterned paper for its background, and I started by creating a shallow flag piece. This is a rectangle where the sides are only 1/4 inch deep. You can see my line there that I drew, and then I cut it in the center of my piece up to that 1/4 inch line, and then cut from the corner to the slice. And then that will give me just a very, very narrow but still visible kind of flag to this large rectangle. Just adds a little bit more interest than a plain rectangle. So that's going to go on top of this bright pink cardstock base, and then I've got a multicolored polka dot paper that's going to go on top of that. And around it all I'm going to use a pink and white piece of twine and tie that with a bow. Now this paper comes from Doodlebug. It is a 6x6 paper pad and it's called Hello Sunshine. It's a little bit older. If it's still available, I'll put a link to it in my video description for you. I love it. It's got lots of bright colors and it's double-sided, so there's multiple choices of patterns and colors. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to tie a bow here to the side of my pattern paper stack. And once I get that the way I want it in the right size and so on, I will go ahead and trim it. And then this can be applied to my card base. And I'm just going to use my ATG adhesive. This is ATG from Scotch. It's a rather large thing, but it does balance well in your hand and it's economical, so I really make use of that as much as I can. Now once that's attached, I'm going to stamp my sentiment. So this time, instead of doing it last, I'm going to put on my sentiment first. And this is because I just want to place my package to fit just right. The sentiment has kind of a arch shape to it, and so I want to apply my package to fit just inside of that. Not too far, not too close. So I'm going to stamp it first and then I'll know where to put my package. Once again, I'm going to use my black VersaFine ink pad for this to get that nice dark black sentiment. It's just beautiful. Now my package has a bit of foam tape on it, so as I mentioned, I'm just going to place it perfectly underneath the sentiment. Then I'm going to add the flowers that I made. I'm going to trim that curly stem so that it's out of the way and doesn't interfere with the foam tape underneath the package. I can just tuck it in under there, no problem at all. And then the other flower will be the same way. I don't need to trim the stem on this one though. I can just tuck that right in. And then I need some finishing touches as always, so I use the pink lacquer to put some dots underneath the package and then just a few around the sentiment. And that finishes card number 5. Here's the close-up of this clean and simple bright and cheery card. I hope you got some good ideas for this kit, but don't go away just yet. Click on any of the links to see more valuable card making ideas. A thumbs up would be appreciated too, and do leave me a comment about your favorite card of the group. Thanks for visiting, have a great week, and I hope to see you back soon. Bye!